Other discoveries that were originally made in China include silk weaving, which influenced the clothing industry, gunpowder, reading glasses, the magnetic compass, and suspension bridge. Nonetheless, by 1900, the empire had grown too weak as other nations were growing stronger. The country's trouble intensified in 1900, a period referred as the Boxer Rebellion climax. During this time, the Chinese killed Europeans and Christians who had been captured during the war. The European government consequently sent in troops to save their nationals, hence paralyzing the Chinese empire. China as a nation has one of the richest cultures in the world and, as mentioned earlier, is one of the oldest. The Chinese culture is dominant not only in China, but also in most of the Asian regions, especially the Eastern Asia. Nonetheless, it is very important to note that the Chinese cultural practices vary greatly according to provinces, cities, and towns. The elements of the Chinese culture include literature, visual arts, martial arts, cuisine, and music, to mention but a few. To begin with, China has 56 different ethnic groups, adding to the fact that the country is the largest population in the world. However, the Chinese people are so closely related such that identifying the different ethnic groupings may be a difficult task. The largest of the ethnic groups in China is the Han Chinese. It is believed that there are many other groups that were absorbed in other dominant ethnicities, hence disappearing. Also, in the Han ethnic group, there are minor distinctions in terms of language and cultural traditions, which create the distinction even within this single division. The Chinese culture is governed by beliefs and philosophies. The dominant philosophies in the heart of China are the Confucianism and Taoism, which form the religious practices of the Chinese. The best word to use in explaining the religious beliefs in China would be a country of pluralism. These beliefs are characterized by the freedom of alignment, as the Chinese religion view is not based on the demand for exclusive adherence of the members. It is even believed that the Chinese religious views are better defined as cultural practices or philosophies than religious practices. However, the dominant religious groupings are the Buddhists and the Taoists. Buddhism has been widely accepted through the Chinese communities and can be considered the greatest with reference to its following. As mentioned earlier, Christianity has a dismal following in China, and this can be owed to the persecution during the war against the Europeans. The religious beliefs of the Chinese people lay more emphasis on ethical, moral, and social values. The Chinese religions also are chastised by their reference to nature and spirits. Superstition is common among the Chinese religious aspects. There is also the aspect of revering the ancestors and appeasing the spirits of the dead. Buddhism, which was introduced to China by the Han Dynasty, was greatly accepted by the majority of Chinese people of all lifestyles. The religion was borrowed from India and was promoted and supported by subsequent dynasty. It became so popular that it overshadowed the indigenous Taoism. The spread of the Buddhist religion sparked some conflict among the followers, which led to the anti-Buddhist persecution. This greatly affected the growth of the religion, as they were greatly suppressed and marginalized. Nonetheless, the region survived and increased in the subsequent centuries. Some of the dynasties that helped the Buddhist culture or religion to flourish include southern and northern dynasties, Sui dynasty, Tang dynasty, and Song dynasty among others. During this period, China was on a decline trend. The country was under great pressure from foreign nations who forcefully controlled China's ports and business. The Opium War between the Chinese and the Britain governments was looming and ended up with Britain controlling of the strategic port of Hong Kong. These wars had one major effect on the Chinese Empire. The authority of its ports was compromised after they conceded defeat. The number of ports that were declared open ports for trade went up to 50 ports. The entry of the European government was a blow to the Chinese people, who became slaves to the Europeans. The European government subdivided the country into spheres of influence, disregarding the wishes of the people of China. This led to the unwanted open door policy that gave foreign countries access to China. Today, China is one of the most economically sound nations on the face of the earth. The country has grown from a developing to a developed country at a speed that has left the entire globe in a shock. Major businesses in the world trace their roots in China, and great investors from the West are eyeing on an opportunity to enter the great Chinese market. Nevertheless, this success and growth in the economy was not easy to come by. The economic history of the Chinese people stretches back from almost 2 millenniums, and the challenges are many. China's economic growth has undergone a series of cycles where the country has had bad economic trends as well as good ones. China experienced a period of peace and prosperity in the era of Emperors Wei and Jing. During their reign, the Taoist principle was dominant, hence, government involvement in the economy was very limited. In the reigns of the two emperors, the Chinese people enjoyed tax reductions on agricultural products. At some point, the taxes were completely removed to enhance growth in the industry and increase production. During the reign of Han Dynasty, the richest men were merchants who dealt with salt and iron. The greatest investment anyone could make by this period was to invest in land. These merchants invested heavily on land, and as a result, they became great landowners in China. Consequently, the landowners became massive employers employing large numbers of peasants. This is how the economy of China began to build up and growth increased from there. Salt and iron were the major commercial commodities, and the players in the industries employed large numbers of the Chinese population. A single salt or iron industrialist could create job openings for not less than 1,000 Chinese people. The businesses grew rampantly with the advancement of drilling. Drilling enabled China to extract more salt, as well as natural gas to be used as fuel. The private industry was growing, and as the emperor viewed the growth, it was threatening the state. This later led to the nationalization of the salt and iron trade aimed at producing profits for the government. Nonetheless, the economy was also driven by other factors of production, such as the liquor industry and the formation of the light industries. Like the iron and salt industries, the liquor industry was also nationalized, although for a short period before it was given back to the private sector. Tracing China's economic development cannot be complete without putting into account the light industries such as textile and pottery, which were both developed in this period. Porcelain also was introduced in this period, and they all contributed to the growth and development of China's economy. The impacts of the development of the iron industry led to the development of agriculture. Agricultural tools were made from the iron. Increased agricultural production and activity as efficiency was achieved through the development of these tools. China over the years has always been on the forefront in the technological world of science. This has been greatly impacted by the country's quest to become the leader in science, technology, and innovation in the next 20 years. The country has become one of the most powerful nations on the face of the earth owing to its innovations and scientific endeavors, which garner support from the political leadership. China prides itself with a strong foundation for its planning systems that ensures the country's stability to support its technological pursuits. The most recent changes in the country's technological scope were experienced in the 1990s. China has all along been a state-governed economy, with every economic activity running through the authority and ownership of the government. The greatest change that influenced growth in the technology industry was the emergence of the non-state sector. The technological development began to take root in between 1949 and 1959. By this time, the industry depended greatly on the support from the Soviet Union, which committed itself to help China with approximately 165 major industrial projects. The country also imported a number of technology and production lines from the Soviet Union, as well as other Western countries. The imported technologies had numerous effects on the Chinese population. They brought along new skills and knowledge, helping the Chinese population to gain necessary skills that were used later to develop their own technological industry. The country would send its people to other countries to train and gain skills in the use of the imported equipments and technologies. The trainees eventually came back after training and were the backbone of China's economic development. The government also played a very great role in making China a technological giant. The spread of the imported technologies was allocated in a manner that the regional balance was observed. The idea of internationalism was first embraced in China in the Han Dynasty era. During this period, the Europeans and the Chinese had 4 points of contact. These included the Northern Land Route, the Central Land Route, the Southern Sea Route, and the Far Southern Sea Route, Smith 78. The trade relations between the West and the Chinese people through maritime commerce further influenced the idea of globalization in the ancient China. Policies such as the open door policy were instrumental in opening China to the rest of the world. Other events that created the atmosphere for a globalized China were the unfortunately Opium War, which led to the loss of control of the major ports consequently. This gave Western countries an access to China, hence leading to globalization. Globalization in China is both an avenue of opportunities as well as a compilation of challenges to its people. The rapid growth of the Chinese economy has been met with severe consequences. For instance, the great development of the heavy industries led to a severe 3-year drought that caused the deaths of almost 20 million people. The industrial growth has also become a challenge to the China's environmental health. Nonetheless, the Chinese have learned through their experiences a factor that gives them an upper hand when it comes to globalization. Today, China is the 6th greatest economy owing to its fast-growing industrial activities. China has garnered this kind of performance learning from its past mistakes and experiences. The Chinese government has formulated policies that support the rapid growth seen in the economy. One of the greatest policies is the Open Up policy, which connects the country to the outside world. This is not limited only to the developed world, but also for the developing. Opening up in the developed world helps in attracting foreign investors. On the other hand, opening up for the developing world gives the Chinese business broader and new markets, hence increasing the chances of growth. The Chinese market has given the world an economic trading ground since the market is very wide, absorbing most of the world's products. China is one of the world's greatest importers, hence consuming most of the world's products. On the other hand, the world is greatly enjoying the Chinese technological development through the low-priced, high-quality Chinese products. China alone provides a vast market for world producers, hence becoming the largest emerging market of the world. HNSNFTHWRLDS for NNTVLZTNS WTHTMHNRD RDDHSTR HHSTR FHN RHS BKVR 5000 IS HNVIS NRF 9.6 MLLN SKR KLMTIS NDTS NTNNTL STLN S 18,000 KLMTIS TS ULTN SVR 1.3 BLLNL HNHS RTD Ultra RH in RT NDHLSH HNSTH HM FTH NVNTNS FMZNG RDUTS NDTHNLGS SSLK RMKNG MVBLT INTNG Gunda NDLLGIH VRTHIS HNHS Feud Hundreds FWIS THS Encurd TS NGHBR NG Unters NDTHS LSBN Encurd BTHM in return US FTS 5000 RRDD HSTR HNNTRHR, AltaBK TBLNDF, SMLL, RGNL-TRBS, WHH, HV, NDD, TLL, THBN, THGRT, UNTRA WHVTD, HFIST, NNMTHL, DNST, Rule HN, WS, THDNSD, in TH 21st Inter. 2200 to 1700. Fundby MRU. HS, DNST, MRKD, HNG, FIM, IMTV, ST, TSLV, ST, HDNST, WS, SUDB TH, SHNG, DNST, 1600 to 1046. HSHNG, DNST, STH, FIST, VLZTN, in HN, FR, WHH, THR, SWRTTN, RRD. HSHNG, DNST, SHRTRZD, BTS, WRTNG, SSTM, Grolta NDBRNZ, THNLG, ND Urban, DVLMNT. In 221. YNG, ZHNG, TK, THTHIN, STH, FIST, MR. LLD, HMSLF, QN, SHUNG, WHH, MNS, TH, FIST, MR. ZHNG, STBL, SHD, TH, FIST, NTILZD, UNFD, MULT, THN, STT, in HNS, HSTR. Fund TH, QN, DNST, 221 to 206. Dern HSRGN, HBGN, TH, Unstruten, FTH, GRT, WLL, FHN, YNG, ZHNGS, BST, KNWN, FR Building, LRG, L, TMB, MLWHH, HUS, TH, RTT, IM, HQN, DNST, MTN, NDWHN, LU, NG, SNT, LDR, VRTHRWT, LU, THN, Fund TH, NDNST, 206. D, 220. Dern TH, NDNST, HN, NDD, WST, S, FRS, ND, WHR, TND, TRD, LNG, TH, SLK, RD, HN, DNST, WS, FLLWD, ETH, HR, NGDMS, RD, 220 to 265. Dern THSR, HNWS, THRWN, NT, RDF, NRH, ND Thermal, VRTH, NT Ferenters, DZNS, FKNGDMS, MTD, FRWR, TWS, FLLWD, BTHJN, 265 to 420, TH Southern ND NRTHRN, DNSTS, 420 to 589, NDTH Su DNSD, 581 to 618. In 618, THNG DNST, 618 to 907, WS, Fund BGNIL, LLD, L Yun, HDTH Su MRR, SSSSNTD, Dern THSRD, HNS, RT, ND Alta Flourished, HSRD, WS, Egypt's impact on other cultures was undeniably immense. From the earliest periods of pre-dynastic Egypt, there is evidence of trade connections that extended as far east as the Indus Valley. These trade routes passed through the Near East, resulting in an early exchange of motifs and ideas between the civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Brought even more active connections with Western Asia, including robust commercial and diplomatic relationships, as well as a mutual exchange of imagery and concepts with cultures like the Assyrians and the Hittites. Lively interactions with the South contributed to dynamic cultures, such as the Kushites, who ruled Egypt during the 25th dynasty and whose monuments displayed an innovative blend of local Nubian and pharaonic imagery. Rulers and the elite from Meroe, in modern Sudan, were buried in pyramid tombs for many centuries, with more than 200 having been identified. That country actually contains more pyramids within its borders than Egypt does. Egypt also provided some of the building blocks for the Aegean, Greek, and Roman cultures, and, through them, influenced many aspects of Western tradition. Today, Egyptian imagery, concepts, and perspectives are found everywhere. When you know what to look for, you will see them in architectural forms, on money, and in our day-to-day lives. Many cosmetic surgeons, for example, use the silhouette of Queen Nefertiti, whose name means the beautiful one has come, in their advertisements. Ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for more than 3,000 years and showed a stunning level of continuity. That is more than 15 times the age of the United States, and consider how often our culture shifts. As recently as 2003, there was no Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. While today we consider the Greco-Roman period to be in the distant past, it should be noted that it is closer to our own time than it was to that of the construction of the pyramids of Giza. It took humans nearly 4,000 years to build something, anything, taller than the Great Pyramid. Contrast that span to modern times. We get excited when a record lasts longer than a decade. Egypt's stability is in stark contrast to the ancient Near East of the same period, which endured an overlapping series of cultures and upheavals with amazing regularity. The earliest royal monuments, such as the Narmer Palette carved around 3100 BCE, display identical royal costumes and poses as those seen on later rulers, even Ptolemaic kings, and Roman emperors on their temples more than 3 millennia later. This consistency and stability is closely linked with one of the central foundational concepts in the way ancient Egyptians saw the world around them. In their view, creation occurred when order triumphed over chaos and harnessed that amorphous power to bring the land of Egypt into existence. The perfect cosmic balance that resulted created the consistent cycles they saw in their natural world, such as the daily rising and setting of the sun and the Nile's annual inundation. This divine order was known as Ma'at, embodying truth, righteousness, justice, and cosmic law, and was eventually personified as a goddess. There was a perpetual struggle between Ma'at and the chaos, known as Isfet. From early in Egypt's history, a primary role of the pharaoh was to be the champion of Ma'at and preserve that cosmic order, to help protect Egypt from the Isfet that surrounded them. The ongoing preservation of Ma'at was seen as fundamentally important, and the drive to maintain that perfect cosmic balance permeated the culture on multiple levels. A vast amount of Egyptian imagery, especially royal imagery that was governed by decorum, a sense of what was appropriate, remained extraordinarily consistent throughout its history. This is why, especially to the untrained eye, their art appears extremely static, and in terms of symbols, gestures, and the way the body is rendered, it was intentional, as the consistency was the whole point. The Egyptians were well aware of their consistency, which they viewed as stability, divine balance, and clear evidence of Ma'at and the correctness of their culture. This consistency was also closely related to a fundamental belief that depictions had an impact beyond the image itself. Tomb scenes of the deceased receiving food or temple scenes of the king performing perfect rituals for the gods were functionally causing those things to occur in the divine realm. If the image of the bread loaf was omitted from the deceased's table, they had no bread in the afterlife. If the king was depicted with the incorrect ritual implement, the ritual was incorrect and could have dire consequences. This belief led to active resistance to change in codified depictions. The earliest recorded tourist graffiti on the planet came from a visitor from the time of Ramses II, who left their appreciative mark at the already 1,300-year-old site of the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, the earliest of the massive royal stone monuments. They were understandably impressed by the works of their ancestors and wrote of their desire to continue that ancient legacy. Egypt is a land of duality and cycles, both in topography and culture. The geography is almost entirely rugged, barren desert, except for an explosion of green that straddles either side of the Nile as it flows the length of the country. The river emerges from far to the south, deep in Africa, and empties into the Mediterranean Sea in the north after spreading from a single channel into a fan-shaped system, known as a delta, in its northernmost section. The river valley is flanked by imposing cliffs of limestone and sandstone, with deposits of other, harder stones like granite and granodiorite being found in the area of Aswan to the south. One of the reasons for the overall stability of Egyptian culture was that it was largely isolated by virtue of its geography. With high cliffs and expansive deserts bordering the east and west, the sea at the north, and a series of huge rapids in the Nile to the south known as cataracts, the stretch of the river valley that gave rise to dynastic Egypt was quite closed off from the outside. Egypt was undoubtedly the gift of the Nile, as the Greek historian Herodotus famously wrote. The influence of this river on Egyptian culture and development cannot be overstated. Without its presence, the civilization would have been entirely different. The Nile provided not only a constant source of life-giving water, but created the fertile lands that fed the growth of this unique and uniquely resilient culture. Each year, fed by melting snow in the far-off headlands deep in Africa, the Nile overflowed its banks in an annual flood that covered the ground with rich, black silt and produced incredibly fertile fields. The Egyptians referred to this area as Kemet, the Black Lands, and contrasted this dense, dark soil against the Deshret, the red lands of the sterile desert. The line between these zones was, and in most cases still is, a literal line. The visual effect is stark, appearing almost artificial in its precision. The annual inundation of the Nile was also a reliable and measurable cycle that helped form their concept of the passage of time. In fact, the calendar we use today in the West is derived from one developed by the ancient Egyptians. They divided the year into 3 seasons: Akhet, inundation; Peret, growing emergence; and Shem, harvest. Each season was divided into 4 30-day months. Although this annual cycle, paired with the daily solar cycle that is so evident in the desert, led to a powerful drive to see the universe in terms of cyclical time, this idea existed simultaneously with the reality of linear time. These two concepts, the cyclical and the linear, came to be associated with 2 of their primary deities: Osiris, the eternal lord of the dead, and Ra, the sun god who was reborn with each dawn. Rulers in Egypt were complex intermediaries that straddled the terrestrial and divine realms. They were, obviously, living humans, but upon accession to the throne, they also embodied the eternal office of kingship itself. The Ka, or spirit, of kingship was often depicted as a separate entity standing behind the human ruler. This divine aspect of the office of kingship was what gave authority to the individual person who was the king. The living king was associated with the god Horus, the powerful, virile falcon-headed god who was believed to bestow the throne to the first human king. Horus's immensely important father, Osiris, was the lord of the underworld. One of the original divine rulers of Egypt, this deity embodied the promise of regeneration. Cruelly murdered by his brother Seth, the god of the chaotic desert, Osiris was revived through the potent magic of his wife Isis. Through her knowledge and skill, Osiris was able to sire the miraculous Horus, who avenged his father and threw his criminal uncle off the throne to take his rightful place. Few civilizations have enjoyed the longevity and global cultural reach of ancient Egypt. Their distinct visual expressions, writing system, and imposing monuments are instantly recognizable by viewers all around the world even today. Put simply, their branding was on point. Despite portraying significant stability over a vast period of time, their civilization was not as static as it may appear at first glance, particularly if viewed through our modern eyes and cultural perspectives. Instead, the culture was dynamic even as it revolved around a stable core of imagery and concepts. The ancient Egyptians adjusted to new experiences, constantly adding to their complex beliefs about the divine and terrestrial realms, and how they interact. This flexibility, wrapped around a base of consistency, was part of the reason ancient Egypt survived for millennia and continues to fascinate. With the blazing sun above, flanked by vast seas of shifting sand, and fed by the life-giving Nile River, which hid frightening creatures beneath its dark waters, the natural world of Egypt was inherently beautiful, but also potentially deadly. Outside the lush river valley, there was little protection from the ever-dominant sun, whose intensity was both feared and revered. The deserts were home not only to many dangerous creatures, but the sands themselves were also unpredictable and constantly shifting. The clear night skies dazzled with millions of stars, some of which seemed to move of their own accord while others rose and fell at trackable intervals. The Nile, with its annual floods, brought fertility and renewal to the land, but could also overflow and wreak havoc on the villages that lined its banks. Careful observers of their environment, the Egyptians perceived divine forces in these phenomena, and many of their deities, such as the powerful sun god Ra, were connected with elements from the natural world. The perception of divine powers existing in the natural world was particularly true in connection with the animals that inhabited the region. There was an array of creatures that the Egyptians would have observed or interacted with on a regular basis, and they feature heavily in the culture. One of the most distinctive visual attributes of Egyptian imagery is the myriad deities that were portrayed in hybrid form, with a human body and animal head. In addition, a wide range of birds, fishes, mammals, reptiles, and other creatures appear prominently in the hieroglyphic script. There are dozens of different birds alone. The Nile was packed with numerous types of fish, which were recorded in great detail in fishing scenes that became a fixture in non-royal tombs. Most relief and painting throughout Egypt's history was created for divine or mortuary settings, and they were primarily intended to be functional. Many tomb scenes included the life-giving Nile and all its abundance, with the goal of making that bounty available for the deceased in the afterlife. In addition to the array of fish, the river also teemed with far more dangerous animals, like crocodiles and hippopotami. Protective spells and magical gestures were used from early on to aid the Egyptians in avoiding those watery perils as they went about their daily lives. The desert, likewise, was full of potentially dangerous creatures. Lions, leopards, jackals, cobras, and scorpions were all revered for their attributes and feared for their ferocity. Soaring above were birds of prey, like falcons who were sharp-eyed hunters, and massive vultures that consumed decaying flesh and fed it to their young. Scarab beetles also seemingly brought new life from decay, and the sacred ibis, with their curved beaks, found sustenance hidden in the muddy banks of the Nile. All of these creatures, and many others, became closely associated with different deities very early in Egyptian history. The Egyptians did not worship animals. Instead, certain animals were revered because it was believed that they were related to particular gods and thus served as earthly manifestations of those deities. Even domesticated animals, such as cows, bulls, rams, and geese, became associated with deities and were viewed as vitally important. Cattle were probably the first animals to be domesticated in Egypt, and domesticated cattle, donkeys, and rams appear along with wild animals on pre-dynastic and early dynastic votive objects, showing massive herds that were controlled by early rulers, demonstrating their wealth and prestige. Pastoral scenes of animal husbandry appear in numerous private tomb chapels and wooden models, providing detailed evidence of their daily practices. Herdsmen appear caring for their animals in depictions that include milking, calving, protecting the cattle as they cross the river, feeding, herding, and many other aspects of their day-to-day care. Already in the pre-dynastic period, the king was linked with the virile wild bull, an association that continues throughout Egyptian history. One of the primary items of royal regalia was a bull tail, which appears on a huge number of pharaonic images. An early connection between the king and lions is also apparent. One scene on a pre-dynastic ceremonial pallet, the battlefield pallet, shows the triumphant king as a massive lion devouring his defeated foes. First dynasty kings appear to have kept lion cubs as pets. In addition, lions, among other animals, were associated with the burials of some early rulers. One of the most iconic images from ancient Egypt is the massive Great Sphinx at Giza, which was sculpted from the living rock of the plateau. This fused form, with the body of a lion and the head of the king, became a common visual expression of royal power. While many of the religious and cultural characteristics of ancient Egypt were evident from very early on and continued all the way through the Roman era, contributing to overall cultural stability, sweeping conceptual developments and adoptions of external elements are also evident. Throughout ancient Egypt's long history, periods of unified control were interspersed with moments of instability where parts of the country were controlled by different authorities. These repeated waves of political and cultural development create a decidedly complex history that spans thousands of years. The civilization of ancient Egypt obviously did not spring fully formed from the Nile mud, although the massive pyramids at Giza may appear to the uninitiated to have appeared out of nowhere. They were founded on thousands of years of cultural and technological development and experimentation. Dynastic Egypt, sometimes referred to as pharaonic after Pharaoh, the Greek title of the Egyptian kings derived from the Egyptian title Paa, Great House, which was used from the New Kingdom on, which was the time when the country was largely unified under a single ruler, begins around 3000 BCE. The period before this, lasting from about 5000 BCE until the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under one ruler, is referred to as pre-dynastic by modern scholars. Prior to this were thriving Paleolithic and Neolithic groups, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years, descended from northward migrating Homo erectus, who settled along the Nile Valley. During the pre-dynastic period, ceramics, figurines, mace heads, and other artifacts such as slate palettes used for grinding pigments begin to appear, as does imagery that will become iconic during the Pharaonic era, and we can see the first hints of what is to come. It is important to recognize that the dynastic divisions modern scholars use were not used by the ancients themselves. These divisions were created in the first chronological history of Egypt, written by an Egyptian priest named Manetho in the 3rd century BCE. Each of the 30 dynasties included a series of rulers usually related by family connections, or the location of their seat of power. Egyptian history is also divided into larger chunks, known as kingdoms, and periods, to distinguish times of strength and unity kingdoms from those of change, foreign rule, or disunity periods. Like many other ancient cultures, the Egyptians themselves referred to their history in relation to the ruler of the time. Years were recorded as the regnal dates of the ruling king, so that with each new reign, the numbers began anew. The usual dating format included the day of the month and season, along with the regnal year of the king. For example, day 4 of the 2nd month of the season Peret in the 3rd year of Khafra. This ancient practice creates challenges for modern historians, making it difficult to determine exact dating for many events and reigns. This is the reason that different resource books on ancient Egypt may provide slightly different dates for the same object. Generally, dates are provided here as circa, c, or approximate, for this reason.